Okay, we'll get going in just a second here. Just reading some updates on this Colorado shooting. A 21-year-old guy purchased an assault rifle less than a week before the attack that killed 10 people. He told, I can't pronounce his name, Ahmad last name is Alyssa, shot an elderly man multiple times Monday outside the Boulder grocery store before going inside. Another person was found shot in a vehicle next to a car registered to the suspect's brother. Then apparently 8 more people inside. They don't know what the motive. I mean, if you're shooting somebody in a car that's registered to a brother, it would seem that this isn't necessarily random, but the attack sent terrorized shoppers and employees scrambling for cover. It was the nation's deadliest mass shooting since 2019 at a Walmart in El Paso, where a gunman killed 22 people that targeted Mexicans. Just all out hell. I mean, it's got to be the worst possible situation to be in. It's just amazing. And I don't know. I mean, there's obviously the political responses to these things that we need background checks, we need what have you, but and I'm not taking a stance on any of that stuff. I can't see where background checks are a bad idea, but I mean, once you get past the initial people, Danny Strong, 20, Nevin Stanisic, 23, Ricky Olds, 25, Trelona, 49. I mean, it just seems based on the names, every nationality, every age group, it's just nuts. Then it's about, and you go back to Aurora and Columbine, that's just crazy. Okay, good afternoon. Let's say I put the wrong date. Sorry about that. It's 3:23. Sorry about that, Mary. I have to apologize. We were scheduled to have Vin Candelora on today, but yesterday, those who may know, North Branford, there was a tragedy involving a moped or something along those lines that took the life of a young boy, I believe 18. And it was someone who was very close to the Candelora family and close to Vin. And so I talked to him about an hour ago. He was still going to come on. He said, I'll suck it up and do it. But he said he's having a hard time concentrating. And so I admire him for wanting to come on, but that was not something I wanted to do. And so we will reschedule that till next week, give him the week. I'm sorry for that loss and certainly that family and then that tragedy in North Branford. So we'll delay Vin Candelora. We'll try to have some other reps on the rest of the week, and then we'll have him on next week. It's interesting as I don't know, whenever you start reading about a shooting like that, you kind of get shaken up. I don't have words for what really happened. There's, they went to his house. His sister said he'd been playing with what looked like a machine gun. By the time he was in custody, Alyssa had been struck by a bullet that passed through his leg. The affidavit said he had removed most of his clothing and was dressed only in shorts. Is this mental illness? Is there some serious issues here? Was it personal? We have no idea. And are these things that would have shown up in a background check? If the answer is yes, the other thing is this. So back when Newtown happened in Connecticut, I remember that happened. I was driving and I was talking to some reporters from the New Haven Register who were, by the way, what a hell time for the Register reporters. They were young reporters, not only covering this, but then going door to door, going to the funerals. It was brutal. Mentally just killed them. But when the discussion, I don't know, a month or two down the road, there was a question from one of the news organizations about getting access to the pictures from inside Newtown. I think it was Michael Moore who wrote or said somewhere that if people were serious about gun control, they should release those pictures. Now, they ultimately did not release the pictures. The mental health of those families, I think, came first. But the idea that photos can drastically change people's perceptions, seeing what would be probably the most horrific photos you can ever see. We're talking 6, 7, 8-year-old children in classrooms. And if you're looking to create a situation where there was going to be legal or legislative response and that there would be overwhelming support, like they demonize the NRA, but at that point, what would the NRA, what could you say? What can you say if you're fighting for gun freedoms or less regulation when pictures like that come out? And we had Ed Meyer was a state representative at the time, and he actually gave a good example. He wanted the pictures to come out, basically because he said during Vietnam, it was the pictures of the brutality that actually changed the way people thought about that war. I am convinced we would have significantly stronger gun legislation now if the pictures from Newtown came out. Decision was made not to. That made sense. But it is. I mean, to this day, every day we see people posting their pictures and names of the families. It's hard to imagine losing a child that young. It's hard to imagine, families right now in Colorado that sent, what are these ages again? They're Homer Tally 74 had, his son died, and he had kids age 7 to 20. There are 7-year-old kids that don't have fathers tonight. The victims were as young as 20, 23, 25. I mean, a 20-year-old kid going to the grocery store, as American as it gets, just going to the grocery store, living through hell, and then lives being taken. It's hard to put into words. And I am of the opinion, I kind of agree with, what do we have a need for these type of guns? I get that they are used in some Olympic sports. I get there's the 99.9% of people that have these guns and use these guns are responsible with them. But, we have limits on how fast a car can go. Not just how fast a car can go on the highway, but how fast manufacturers can make a car to go on the highway. There's limits on, and we do these things to limit the amount of damage. We understand there's going to be some damage. We understand if we gave everybody a bow and arrow, some people would die from a bow and arrow. We also understand that, with a bow and arrow, you can't likely kill 10 people or 20 kids in the school in a very fast amount of time before someone getting to you. At the same time, I also tend to believe that there's some merit to this thing of, well, if everybody had a gun, maybe be less likely to do something like this. I don't know the answer. There isn't an answer. There's people taking sides and thinking what the outcome can be. But I tend to agree with the side of saying, why are we making guns that have this ability? It's certainly not for hunting. Nobody's using these guns for hunting. Nobody's using these guns to live. And if we're using them for sport, imagine if we found out basketballs can kill 10 people at a time. We would get rid of basketball. So does the idea that we have to have these firearms that do this sort of damage doesn't mean no one expects any damage ever from guns. It doesn't mean we're outlawing all guns, but it does seem like there should be some limit to how much damage one person can do in a short amount of time. Does that mean they can't get 10 handguns that shoot one bullet at a time? Sure they can. But it's less likely we'd have less of these, in my opinion, going forward. It's just amazing to see. Steve, Chicago has some of the strongest gun legislation in the country, and 25 people were shot last weekend. Yeah. So when you have a gun ban in an area, it will take years, if not centuries, to get to the ideal number. I hate that Chicago thing is bullshit. They have the toughest laws. Yeah. Some people still have guns. Unless we're going door to door and taking guns, getting rid of banning guns. This is why I don't subscribe to a gun ban. But I do subscribe to gun regulation. And if you want real gun regulation, 1, maybe show the awful pictures. And 2, let the lawsuits be absurd. Let the lawsuits against these gun companies go nuts. they'll stop making them. At some point, it's just not worth it to make them. We're looking at extremes. Chicago has these amazing laws, and they banned everything and all these things. Yeah, people still have guns. They didn't go taking them from door to door. So people still have guns. There's still illegal guns. There's violent areas. And most of those shootings in Chicago came from a very small area of geographic region where gangs or what have you. So, yes, it's a common refrain. We hear it all the time. We regulate things in this country. We regulate things on this planet. We limit the damage. It's not that we say there's going to be no damage. We allow cars. We allow planes. We realize there's going to be plane crashes. There's going to be car devastation. There's going to be car crashes. But we do things to limit those things. We put airbags in cars. We mandate certain brake systems. We have, at the end of the day, we have speed limits and the limits on what a motor or an engine can go or the speed it can go. Because realizing these things can be weaponized. At the end of the day, having regulations is okay. When we're having a conversation about regulation, one side runs to, oh my God, my rights are being restrained. No, we have regulations on everything. And the other side, the left, goes to, we need no guns. We need to get rid of all the guns. That's never going to happen either. So everybody runs to their sides and nothing gets done, or we pass some regulation that doesn't really do anything. What are we going to do? What laws would you like to enforce? If people still have guns and then you ban new guns, it doesn't solve the problem. It would take decades, if not centuries, to solve that problem. Period. So the question is, what are we willing to accept? That's a very simple question. How much damage are we willing to accept? We're willing to accept car crashes. We're willing to accept plane crashes. Right? We're willing to accept that. So the question isn't, are we going to accept some damage from guns? Because obviously we're going to. It's what level of damage are we willing to accept? We'll accept that an angry husband may shoot their wife. We'll accept that an angry husband may shoot their wife and 2 kids. Will we accept that someone with mental illness will grab a gun from their mother and go into Newtown and shoot how many? How many kids? 20-something kids? Will we accept that somebody, we don't know the reason, walks into a grocery store and kills 10 people? Are we okay with that? And the amount of regulation we put in place is all a question of what damage we're willing to accept for that freedom. So that's the thing we have to balance out. We have our freedoms. Same thing, we have freedom of speech, but you can't yell fire in a movie theater. Right? There's a limit to that freedom of speech. Not everything is free for all. We have a freedom to drive a car, but we have to have insurance for it, but we have to have registration for it, but that car has to be street legal. We accept limitations on those things. The problem that the right will have is the last time we had the discussion on gun control in Branford and in Connecticut, Ed Meyer put forth a single bullet bill. That's what he put forward. That destroys the argument. When the left puts forward a bill like that, which is ridiculous, it gives credence to the argument that you just want to take all the guns. At the same time, when logical, intelligent plans go forward, but the right fights them like crazy as, well, it's a slippery slope, we can't start anything, they lose credibility. You had, this is true, at the time of Newtown, the representative was, oh my God, I forgot his name now. He's on TV now. He ran for governor. And this wasn't the reason he didn't win governor. He ran against, who was the rich guy on the Republican side who ran? He ran against him, and he was by far the better candidate. This was when Malloy ran for the first time. And Malloy ran for the first time. I'm trying to remember all the names. And Foley was the guy who ran against him. But McKinney, John McKinney, was the representative representing Newtown, Republican. And he voted for the gun law. And Republicans attacked him like crazy. One, he had to vote for it. And the gun law wasn't that bad. It didn't drastically change anything. People with guns who went hunted still were able to hunt. People who had guns still had them. The world didn't come to an end. It wasn't the end of life as we know it. Your freedoms weren't taken away. It was just additional regulation. We had Ethan's Law in Guilford that passed statewide. Nobody's world came to an end. It wasn't a slippery slope. Yes, when some representatives put forth ridiculous gun bills, it helps to give fire to the opposition. See, that's how far you want to go. There are Democrats who want to eliminate guns. It will not happen. It cannot happen. You'd be going door to door taking guns. You'd have shootings all over the place. So we can say, yes, and people are always going to say, yes, it's mental health. Yes, that's true. The question is that we always have to answer is what degree of carnage, what degree of death are we willing to accept? And we ask that question in everything. If we tripled the money for heroin prevention, could we have less suicides and less heroin deaths? Probably. That's a happy medium. If we mandated that every vehicle had 47 airbags, yes, the cost would go up, but we'd have less deaths. Is that true? Sure it is. With guns, that's the question. Are we willing to accept this? Are there steps we can take to avoid this? Some may say no. Are there steps we can take to have fewer of these? I think absolutely. And then how does that compare to the freedom that we're supposed to have? And does that freedom extend? When the founding fathers were talking about freedoms to bear arms, they were talking about, these long, single shot things. Clearly they knew nothing about assault rifles or semi-whatever. I'm not a gun expert by any means. Would they have acted the same way? We understand that you're not supposed to have a grenade. You can't have landmines. You can't have a tank. Why? Because the damage they can cause is significant. And we do this balancing act all the time of deciding how much are we willing to accept. We've accepted that there could be car accidents. What happened? We had a major car crash where a truck ran into a car and killed a family years ago. The response for that was, in Connecticut, we're going to take down all our toll booths because that's where it happened. So that level of carnage was not acceptable to us. Those are decisions we make. The financial rewards were not worth the physical life it takes. So that's a decision that we make. Before we get too much further, I want to talk about our COVID numbers because I'm seeing more and more and more people post, Branford's numbers are going up and these numbers are going up and we need to be careful. Nothing I'm about to say is to be implied that we should not be vigilant in everything we do. Keep our masks on, avoid very tight, close places, what have you. Follow all the advice. But we did have, in watching the Board of Finance meeting last night, the head of East Shore Health give us some numbers and basically said Branford numbers are a little bit higher. It's a higher positivity rate. And so I've been saying this on this podcast for a while and in other conversations, but I'm going to say this again. Statistics are often, for lack of a better word, bullshit. We have to, look at statistics over time, but we have to be able to ask more in-depth questions about the statistics that are given to us. So if we hear that Branford's at a 5.5% positivity rate, oh my God, that's tough. That's higher than the rest of the state. That's crazy. Except we don't know how many tests were given. And to give an example of this, I get every day from Lamont an update on COVID numbers. And so I will tell you that January 28th, there are about 40,000 tests given. March 19th, 42,000 tests. March 17th, 15,000 tests. Why does that make a difference? Because the positivity rate is based on drastically different number of tests that are given on a regular basis. If we give 100 tests and 5 people are positive, it's a 5% positivity rate. If we give 50 tests and 5 people are positive, it's a 10% positivity rate. Same people are positive. And what we are seeing is the number of positives go down. So we can use these numbers and say, oh my God, it's terrible and bad things are happening and all this other stuff, but it's really not true until we know how many tests are being given. Here's what we do know. 90% of the people over 65 in Branford are vaccinated. The vast majority of people, I think over 55, have already had their first shot. The people most at risk in Branford have their vaccination. When we start using these numbers to shut down school or keep school open or what have you, we also have to remember, Yes, they're saying the numbers among children and people under that age of 45 are going up. But they're the only ones getting tested now. You've taken the older groups because they're vaccinated, they're out. So yeah, the percentage of people underneath that are going to go higher because they're the only ones being tested. And we're seeing that when it spreads among those groups, we're not seeing people die from it. Some symptoms, but not die from it. Now, these are general observations. These are not, yes, can kids die from it? Sure, they can. Has it happened? Yes, it has. But in general, we're seeing numbers that are not, they are truthful, they are accurate, but they are not intellectually honest until we start comparing them over a much larger period of time. And last night we saw, and East Shore Health is never going to tell you, oh, the numbers are great, be fine, take your masks off. They're never going to say that. They're always going to urge caution, but they're using numbers out of context. Yes, Brantford might be a little bit higher, but how many tests came in? Another town that might skew older might all be vaccinated. They may not be getting as many tests. How many got tested that day? If we can have a difference in tests on the 17th to the 19th between 15,000 and 42,000 tests, the percentage is irrelevant. That we jump from 3% to 5% isn't relevant. How many people got it? And we're seeing those numbers go down. And then the question is, the people that did get it, how bad were they? Was it just light symptoms, or were they on a respirator? So we see these numbers thrown about, and we see this, by the way, in every world, right? Every single time we see numbers, Mark Twain's great quote, lies, damn lies, and statistics, we can spin these any way we want. We can spin it and say it's getting awful. We can spin it and say it's great, it's going great. What we do know is the vast majority of people over 65 have been vaccinated. Brantford's doing spectacular when vaccinated. The only thing holding us back is the number of vaccinations coming in that we can distribute. So we know that's the case. All the numbers are getting better when we start understanding that. Now, Guilford yesterday shut down their schools. They did at-home schooling for today. They already had it scheduled for Wednesday because they're seeing an uptick in cases. They're trying to be preventive of that. But again, we have to take that with a massive grain of salt. Those most at risk have been vaccinated. And so we saw, I'm going to go look at this because I know Tracy Everson was put, and I'm not being critical of Tracy Everson. I've been critical of her before, but not in this case. She's just posting what she was told at the meeting, and that's fine. And I'll just read this. Brantford's positivity rate is currently 5.9%, far exceeding the statewide average. Again, how many people were tested? That's what we don't know. And two, if we know, and I'll keep going, the stat was delivered last night by Mike Pascosilla, East Shore Health District. We know he's going to, press the urgency of this no matter what. We're not going down at the same rate as other communities in the state. Brantford has 2,100 positive cases. Okay, that's not true. 2,100 positive cases overall, not just right now. So there's some things taking certainly out of context here, but I got to keep going here. They're showing the B117 variant prevalent among young people. Yeah, because they're the ones getting tested. Older people aren't getting tested. On the plus side, Brantford is doing well in terms of vaccinations, 93% over 75, 94% over 65. So yeah, take all these numbers with a grain of salt. Yes, the people who are going to tell you it's bad, we know they're going to tell you it's bad. The health department, the East Shore Health, is always going to say that. He's never going to say, hey, loosen up. It is not a good idea to loosen up. But to say we have a higher number doesn't mean anything until we know who's tested and how many. Comparing a number to a number doesn't make sense when we have 300 tested one day and 140 tested the next day. It doesn't add up. And so, and I've had that issue now for a few months now. We can't compare the positivity rates and the hospitalization rates and all that stuff to what we saw those first 5, 6, 7 months because we see people vaccinated now. The impact is different. It was interesting that no one had the flu last year. So I'm wondering how we determine, yes, positive for COVID, but is it mostly flu or what have you? We'll see that going forward. And by nothing I'm saying is telling you, hey, don't be careful. But at the end of the day, take all these numbers with a grain of salt. Brantford's doing very, very well. The state is doing extremely well. The numbers are going to vary based on how many people are tested that day. Overall, the number of people with COVID at any one given time is going down. It's significantly lower, and that's a good thing. I want to talk, as we get more information about this Colorado incident, we'll talk about that more tomorrow. It's hard. It's funny. I should not have read that just before coming on the podcast because it kind of gets stuck in your head. I want to read some of these comments before we go too far. Michael, I'm not a gun owner, but I know the gun laws only take guns away from law-abiding citizens. Again, it's not really Michael, I'm not a gun owner. It's not a question of taking guns away. It's a question of what guns are available. So we have cars that have limits on the speed they can go and what they can do, that are street legal and not street legal, what have you. Why? Because they can do significant damage. We don't even make those things available. They're just not available. You can't get a grenade. You can't buy a tank and have a working tank in your driveway. Why? Because they do damage that goes beyond what we have considered as society acceptable. We can yell about rights all we want, but that's what we as a society have decided. We make laws to show that. So are we saying we're taking your gun rights away? No, by no means. But can we limit the potential damage an individual gun can do? Yes. And there's nothing wrong with that. We have done that in every area of life. You cannot yell fire in a crowded theater. That's not taking away your right to free speech. Not being able to have a car that can go 700 miles an hour does not take away your right to own a car. So it's okay to have limits on what's produced. We do this all the time. We have limits on what's produced for food. We have mandates on farmers. We have healthcare, pollution. Why? It doesn't mean you can't be in business. Doesn't mean you can't discard your trash. You have to do it a certain way. We're not saying take guns away. We're saying limit the extent of the damage a single gun can do. And what's the balancing act? What are you giving up? If a gun can shoot 15 bullets in half a second or whatever it is, and I'm not a gun guy. I don't know the words. So I sound stupid. I get that. But what other practical application does that gun have? What other application of benefit to society does that gun have? I don't know the answer to that. I haven't seen it. Yes, I've seen the argument that people say, it's an Olympic sport. Yeah, but that's not helping. I mean, fine. I never even watched it. I've seen the shooting sport where they get underneath and they shoot like a single shot, but I've never seen something that can shoot a million bullets. What positive thing in our world, in our society, is the gun that this shooter in Colorado used? What positive impact does it have? A rifle, normal rifles, shooting a deer, food, whatever. Okay, get it, no problem. But give me the positive impact that item has that he used to shoot 10 people, obviously shoot far more bullets than that, in Colorado, that the kids used in Aurora, that this kid used in Newtown or in Columbine. What is the practical use of those guns, and how does that use outweigh the negative impacts it can have in these shootings that we see? That's what I want an answer to. That's what we need to hear some logical explanation for. And if not, we should all be able to agree, okay, the harm outweighs the positive practical impacts. I haven't seen those positive practical impacts yet. If somebody can do that, I'd love to read it. Send it to me. Steve, to a certain extent, they don't enforce their laws. That's true. To a certain extent, we have to enforce laws better. At the same time, you have a lot of people working diligently to skirt those laws and get around them. Michael, you need to dig into the root of the causes. That's true, but mental illness is a massive, massive thing. Unless we're going to just, raise double taxes to try to fund mental illness issues, it may not be practical. Catherine, Connecticut has some of the strictest gun laws in the country. We have significantly less gun violence than in 2012. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but I get the point. Connecticut may also have to do with, I think it's less gun violence with education. There's a bunch of other factors that play a role there. Most people on the left do not want to take all guns away. That's true. We just want federal universal background checks, waiting periods, and a ban on AR-15s. I don't think most of the country has a problem with background checks. There are people fighting it. Republicans, for some reason, are fighting it. I don't see why. I don't know. I mean, the NRA would probably do themselves a great service from a public perspective standpoint if they just came out for it. Waiting period is going to be interesting because this kid apparently got a gun 6 days before the shooting. So that's going to be very interesting to see if that comes back up again with that waiting period. Richard, I realize the gun issue is a high priority today. Understand that. It actually wasn't on my agenda until I was reading it just before this. How about doing a podcast on Connecticut Senate Bill 884 and House Bill 6634 designed to raise the already high cost of living? I will. I'll look those up. Maybe we'll talk about them tomorrow. And certainly we'll try to get to them before we have Candelora on. Mental health, living in Connecticut. People get their license renewed. It should be another background check. No issue with that. Background checks at gun shows. So yeah, the gun show loophole. And that's where, just guys go into the back of a garage or back of their car and selling guns out the back. But that's illegal. Mary, have you been talking to Bob? He agrees with you while I stress over percentages. Yeah, percentages don't mean anything, especially now. It doesn't. I mean, listen, here's the deal. When we didn't go back to school, one of the reasons we didn't go back to school full time was that, kids can spread this between, and while they weren't dying from it, they can give it to their grandparents. They were carriers to other people. The huge thing about wearing masks and staying separate was stay home because you care about other people. You don't want to be a carrier to someone else, even if you had a great immune system. Well, the people most at risk have it now. They have the vaccine. So this concept of comparing numbers to numbers really doesn't make sense anymore. You're not necessarily, if you get this, but there's no impact, or if the symptoms are mild, at the end of the day, is that the end of the world? I mean, if you're not getting anything worse than the flu, it's not the end of the world. No one needs an R-15 but a soldier. I kind of agree with that. Ray, my wife said I was right today. I'm 100% on the day, likely 0. I don't know what that's about. That is one response we never get from gun advocates other than it's our right. Okay, Mike, I'm not sure what that was in reference to, but it's a response to the question of what value does a high firing rate weapon provide? Yeah, that's the question we ask ourselves. We're willing to accept death by motor vehicle because of the positive impacts motor vehicles have on society. We're willing to accept the occasional deaths by airline because we understand the positive impacts airlines have on society. We accept danger. That's a balancing act. So forget guns. These particular guns, we see the dangers. We see these shootings, horrific events. What are the positive impacts those particular an AR-15 has on society? I don't know. And by the way, you can call me out on it. I don't know if an AR-15 is legal or not right now, what the numbers are, what the nomenclature is, all that stuff. We can get to that later. I'm not pretending to be an expert. But take every model that's available and ask the same questions we ask about motor vehicles and airplanes. We're willing to accept this danger in exchange for what positive impacts on society. Cars have a positive impact on society. Can cost lives, but a positive impact overall. Planes, positive impact on society. These guns used in these shootings, semi-automatic weapons, we see the danger. How are we offsetting that with a positive impact on society? Somebody send me that article. Somebody make the argument that there are positive impacts on society that outweigh the negatives that we're seeing. As gruesome as this statement may be, there are positive impacts from cars that outweigh some of the awful, terrible, horrific car accidents we see. Millions of people get to work. It provides a living for millions of people, what have you. Airlines, when a plane crashes, it's awful. It's terrible. But we can understand there are positive society benefits because of airlines. Show me what those are from these guns. We know how awful it can be. Show me what the positive impacts on society are that outweigh that. I have yet to hear it. So to those yelling about they're taking your guns from, we're not taking your guns. Give me just the models that are being used in these shootings where you can shoot 20 bullets in half a second, whatever it is. Show me the positive impacts of those. Michael, part of the problem is society itself. Look at countries where guns are not prevalent. You see more stabbings or vehicle attacks. How do we address this? We're never going to be able to answer that. AR-15 is legal. Would never give to a soldier, not a military weapon. It's not an assault rifle. I don't know what it is. I don't. Again, I'm not pretending to be a gun expert by any means. And I'm not even comparing what a soldier has, because there can be military practical reasons for in military you would have that would not exist for a civilian. But that's what no one has yet been able to make the case. What is the positive impact of that item in society? Remember when we had JARTs? And those things that were like metals, you threw them in the air. They were a yard game. And you threw them up and they came down, and some people, I don't know if they were killed or injured or got them in their foot or their head or whatever it is. And then we decided as a society in passing laws that the benefit, the pleasure of playing with JARTs was not worth the potential damage they caused. Those are decisions we make as a society in electing representatives and giving testimony and allowing those elected people to pass laws. With these guns, that's what I'm looking for. Show me the benefits. Then once we see those benefits, someone like me or an elected official, what have you, can then weigh them. I just haven't seen it yet. In all this time, no one has been able to make the argument that these types of guns have a positive impact on society that outweighs the potential danger. Question is, are they worth it? I wanted to read more about that as officials release potential motives, whether it's mental illness or what have you. We'll talk more about that going forward. But that's that. In any event, guys, thanks for joining me today. Interesting conversation. I'm always like hearing some feedback on military. And if somebody has a good gun article that explains why these particular guns should be legal or not be regulated more, please send it. I'd love to take a look at it. Thanks for joining me. I hope you enjoy an amazing night in spectacular weather, and I will see you tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night.